Good morning. Good to see everyone this morning. We are concluding our study of Joshua, Judges, and Ruth. We took last quarter to deal with primarily the book of Joshua, and this quarter we've dealt with Judges, and now last week the beginning of Ruth. I realize we've already looked at chapter 1. Derek did a great job with that. All I'm going to do, though, is as short as this book is, so that we reorient ourselves. I'm going to read the first chapter and go right into the second chapter. Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to dwell in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech. The name of his wife was Naomi. And the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion, Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah. And they went to the country of Moab and remained there. Then Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left and her 2 sons. Now they took wives of the women of Moab. The name of one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. And they dwelt there about 10 years. Then both Mahlon and Chilion also died, so the women survived 2 sons, or the woman survived 2 sons and her husband. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law that she might return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab that the Lord had visited his people by giving them bread. Therefore, she went out from the place where she was, and her 2 daughters-in-law with her, and they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. And Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go, return each to her mother's house. The Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find rest, each in the house of her husband." So she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. And they said to her, "Surely we will return with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Are there still sons in my womb that they may be your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, go, for I'm too old to have a husband. And if I should say I have hope, if I should have a husband tonight and should also bear sons, would you wait for them till they were grown? Would you restrain yourselves from having husbands? No, my daughters, for it grieves me very much for your sakes that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me." Then they lifted up their voices and wept again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. And she said, "Look, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." Now, I'm not sure we really caught that last week, but she went back to her people and her gods. Now watch the contrast. But Ruth said, "Entreat me not to leave you or to turn back from following after you. For wherever you go, I will go, and wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts you and me." When she saw that she was determined to go with her, she stopped speaking to her. Now the 2 of them went until they came to Bethlehem. And it happened, when they'd come to Bethlehem, that all the city was excited because of them. And the women said, "Is this Naomi?" But she said to them, "Do not call me Naomi, call me Mara. For the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full, and the Lord has brought me home again empty. Why do you call me Naomi, since the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has afflicted me?" So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, with her, who returned from the country of Moab. Now they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of barley harvest. There was a relative of Naomi's husband, a man of great wealth, of the family of Elimelech. His name was Boaz. So Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, "Please let me go to the field and glean heads of grain after him in whose sight I may find favor. And she said to her, Go, my daughter. All right, she is preparing to go out and glean. And to us, it's a little bit foreign. We don't have anything that I know of that would be like this. So let's briefly look at the book of Leviticus chapter 19, where God gave instructions to the children of Israel that seemingly are being fulfilled or in this particular passage that we're examining. So I want to look at verses 9 and 10 of Leviticus 19. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not wholly reap the corners of your field, nor shall you gather the gleanings of your harvest. You shall not glean your vineyard, nor shall you gather every grape of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and the stranger. I am the Lord your God. So there was a rule in regard to the harvest in Israel. And this was the way they took care of poor people. Now, I want to make a couple of observations. I think they're good principles that we need to follow. God never has provided food for someone who would not work. The corners of the field had to go glean them. They had to go harvest. They had a job to do. I believe that work and earning your wages, even if they're slender, are a means of causing someone to have self-esteem. To constantly be the recipient of gifts that are unearned is to lower one's own self-image. I think God knew that. In fact, I know He knows man well enough to know that. And I believe that's part of why this law exists. Now, let me tell you something else about what the Israelites said. You can tell how a man thinks about his money, in other words, how greedy he is or how stingy he is, by how much he leaves in the corner of his fields. You might get kind of technical and just leave a little bitty spot in each corner of the field for people to come back and glean. But if you're really a benevolent, caring individual, you'd leave a broader, corner there so that the poor and the strangers could be taken care of. Please observe that God understood that His people had formerly been strangers in the land of Egypt. And He constantly wants them to remember that strangers have needs and deserve care just like anybody else. And that is not just powerful, it points toward what's going to come in the future when God is going to take care of not just the children of Israel, but He's going to take care of all people because of the gift of His Son. So she went to glean, and by the way, I think I left off a word there after him, in whose. I left the word in out of that first slide. So I caught 3 errors this time of my own doings. Okay, let's begin to look at verse 3. Then she left and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech. Now, the inspired penman says she happened to come to, and that's all I can for sure say. But I do wonder if this isn't the providence of God, that she goes to just the right field, that she's harvesting in the field of Boaz as this story plays out. It's going to be very important that she's in those fields, that she ends up under his oversight and his care. So just I love that word, it happened, because it makes me wonder, and one of those questions I want to get to heaven. Did you providentially have something to do with this happening to take place. Okay, verse 4. Now behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem and said to the reapers, "The Lord be with you." And they answered him, "The Lord bless you." Then Boaz said to his servant who was in charge of the reapers, "Whose young woman is this?" So the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered and said, "It is the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab." And she said, "Please let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves." So she came and has continued from morning until now, though she rested a little in the house. Then Boaz said to Ruth, "You will listen, my daughter, will you not? Do not go to glean in another field, nor go from here, but stay close to my young women. Let your eyes be on the field which they reap, and go after them. Have I not commanded the young men not to touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink from what the young men have drawn." So she fell on her face, bowed down to the ground, and said to him, "Why have I found favor in your eyes, that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner?" And Boaz answered and said to her, "It has been fully reported to me all that you've done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, and how you have left your father and your mother and the land of your birth, and have come to a people whom you did not know before. The Lord repay you your work, and a full reward be given you by the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge." Okay, several ideas, or at least two, that I think we need to look at. First of all, observe that people know what she's been doing. If you and I think we can live without anybody knowing what we're doing, we're mistaken. Folks know the nature of us, of who I am and who you are. They're going to know if you're a grumpy, difficult person to get along with. In my neighborhood, that's not totally difficult. There's actually a house, and this is a subdivision, that has posted a severe warning about trespassing, not just right in front of the front door, it's by the fence too. And I'm thinking, first of all, who's got time to go bother them? And secondly, why are they that concerned about it? But there it is. People gonna know who you are. If you go all the time to worship and you go to do various things, folks are gonna know that. If you're a person who loses your temper a lot, yells at your wife or your husband, yells at your children, people are going to know that too. They know about us. Boaz already knew about Ruth. He already knew who she was and what she was about. And then the second thing to notice it says, Boaz says she has placed herself under the wings of God. The imagery here is of a mother hen, with her chicks gathered around under her. And you remember, Naomi said what? If you go back to the first chapter, Ruth said what? To Naomi. She said, "Your God shall be my God." And Boaz translates that a little bit for us and lets it be known that she's put herself under the wings of God. So, yes, she's from Moab, but I propose to you that the evidence says that she is a proselyte, that she's become a Jew by choice, that she followed her mother-in-law and began to worship the God of heaven. Now, you may wonder, why bring that up? And I'm going to tell you why, because later we're going to see that she is in the lineage of Christ. And if you study the rules about the Moabites, you're going to see that the Moabites were not allowed up to the 10th generation to go into the area where the Jews worship God. And there's going to be a particular descendant of this Moabitess that I think we're going to see go into the presence of God. So how does that happen? It's because she became a proselyte. She became a Jew. That's my suspicion. Can't prove that, but that's the only answer I've got, because he's not 10 generations removed from coming out of the land of Moab. Okay, so that's the way the way that he puts that. Verse 13. Then she said, "Let me find favor in your sight, my Lord, for you have comforted me and have spoken kindly to your maidservant, though I am not like one of your maidservants." Now Boaz said to her at mealtime, "Come here and eat of the bread, and dip your piece of bread in the vinegar." So she sat beside the reapers, and he passed parched grain to her, and she ate and was satisfied, and kept some back. Okay, now again, I want to pause. What kind of woman is Ruth? Well, she's a woman constantly thinking about other people. She eats her meal, yes, but out of the grain that she's taken for her meal, she tucks some away. Now, I'd probably put it in my pockets when I go on airplanes. I always wear a sports coat because every time they give me something to eat in the plane, and it ain't much, let me tell you, but every time they give me something, I stick it in my pockets. So if I get hungry, I've always got something. It may not be much, but I got something to eat, that is with me. Well, I don't know where she put this, but I know she saved it. And she's not saving it for herself. We're going to see who she saved it for later. But notice her thoughtfulness for people she loves. And again, she's teaching us all the way through. She's teaching us the kind of attitude that we ought to have. And I think we see that quite clearly. All right, verse 15 of chapter 2 of Ruth. And when she rose up to glean, Boaz commanded his young men, saying, "Let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not reproach her. Also, let grain from the bundles fall purposefully for her. Leave it that she may glean, and do not rebuke her." Now, it's not just Ruth that's looking out for somebody, is it? It's also Boaz. He knows what she's doing. We've already seen that. He knows she's taking care of her mother-in-law. And so that she has a good harvest and they can live or subsist on what she is able to glean, he instructs them, help her out just a little bit. Accidentally, on purpose, drop some of your grain. Because they're not allowed to pick it up. God's law is if you drop it, you can't pick it up. Instead, you leave it for the gleaners, for the strangers and the poor who may be in the field. So he's setting things up for her as he does that. So pick up verse 17. So she gleaned in the field until evening and beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. Then she took it up and went into the city, and her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned. So she brought out and gave to her what she had kept back after she had been satisfied. That's what she kept back at lunch. So who'd she take it to? Her mother-in-law, who was at home without anything to eat, I presume. So she took care of her. And her mother-in-law said to her, "Where have you gleaned today, and where did you work? Blessed be the one who took notice of you." Now, how did she know somebody took notice of her? Because she observed how much she had gleaned. And my suspicion is when you start talking about an ephah, you're talking about a lot of gleaning for one woman in one day. And so it appears that Naomi's picking up on, hey, somebody's looking out for you. Who is it that's doing that? So I left off there in verse 19. We're at the end. Blessed be the one who took notice of you. So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked and said, this man's name with whom I work today is Boaz. Then Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, blessed be he of the Lord who has not forsaken his kindness to the living and the dead. Now, Naomi knows who this is. And she sees that not only is Boaz being good to Ruth, he's being good to Naomi too. And in a sense of the word, then, isn't he helping out the dead? I mean, I've got a dear friend who, because of a number of different circumstances, has arrived at, he's just a shade older than me, and I'll leave the rest of that alone. He's a shade older than me. But at any rate, he finds himself where he doesn't really have enough to leave his wife when he dies, and it's worrying him to death that he doesn't have enough to leave her. And he's working extra jobs and things like that to save up money to leave. I only bring that up because I think it's evident that we try to take care of the folks that we're going to leave behind, don't we? Most of us have maybe a small life insurance policy, or maybe we've saved up a little bit of money or whatever, so that the people we leave behind will be able to take care of themselves. Well, when Boaz helps Ruth, he thereby helps Naomi, and in some ways he's doing for Elimelech and Mahlon and Chilion what they can't do themselves. Things they would have liked to have done, but things they cannot do. And so that's why I think Ruth couches it in that way. She goes on in that 20th verse at the end. And Naomi said to her, this man is a relation of ours, one of our close relatives. Ruth the Moabitess said, he also said to me, you shall stay close to my young men until they've finished all my harvest. And Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, it is good, my daughter, that you go out with his young women, and that people do not meet you in any other field. So she stayed close by the young women of Boaz to glean until the end of barley harvest and wheat harvest. And she dwelt with her mother-in-law. By the way, first harvest in Israel every year is barley. The second harvest is wheat. In this country, we might say it differently. Like you go to the Midwest, where they put crops in let's say Oklahoma and Kansas and up through that area, they'll have wheat first, and it's often followed either by corn or by soybean. That's the way they do it. Well, in Israel, it's barley first and then wheat, following along behind it. And they literally go from harvesting the one to harvesting the other. That's the way that works. So they plant multiple crops that they're working their way through. So one of the big things to pick up on here is that she says, this is a close relation of ours. And you might ask, why is that significant? Well, if you would, put a finger or something in where that place where we are, and go back to the book of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy chapter 25. And what we want to look at is what's called the law of levirate marriage. And we don't, to my knowledge, we don't have anything like this among us, but this is, again, what a provision that God made for the widows who would be in the land of Israel. So pick up in Deuteronomy 25, let's begin at verse 5. If brothers dwell together and one of them dies and has no son, the widow of the dead man shall not be married to a stranger outside the family. Her husband's brother shall go in to her, take her as his wife, and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. Okay, pause a minute. There's a tragic a tragic instance of this being carried out not really being carried out in the history of Israel. Judah had 3 sons. His first son did something wrong, and he ended up dying. And the second son married his wife, and by the way, the first son's wife's name was Tamar. And he married Tamar, but he didn't want to have children that took his brother's name. And so he acted in a fashion that prevented her from having any children, and God struck him dead for that. So Judah only has one son left, and he really doesn't want to give that son to Tamar. Sounds to me like he's a little bit superstitious. Already lost 2 sons to you, woman. I'm not going to lose a third one. Sounds a little bit like that. Maybe, may not be, but that's what I sense as I read that. And she maneuvers things, sets herself up by the side of the road when she knows he's going out to mourn, and she ends up having relations with her father-in-law, has a child. And when he prepares to stone her, she shows him whose things come from the man who caused her to be with child, and they were his things. He knew whose they were. His signet ring, for example, his staff. Everybody knew who those things belonged to, and he ended up saying, "You've been more righteous than I have." And so, by the way, she is one of the women in the lineage of Christ, isn't she? So it comes out of this law of levirate marriage, which pre-exists, obviously, the law of Moses. Well, let's keep going. Verse 6 of Deuteronomy 25. "And it shall be that the firstborn son which she bears will succeed to the name of his dead brother, and that his name may not be blotted out of Israel. But if the man does not want to take his brother's wife, then let his brother's wife go up to the gate to the elders and say, 'My husband's brother refuses to raise up a name to his brother in Israel. He will not perform the duty of my husband's brother.' Then the elders of his city shall call him and speak to him. But if he stands firm and says, 'I do not want to take her,' then his brother's wife shall come to him in the presence of the elders, remove his sandal from his foot, spit in his face, and answer and say, 'So shall it be done to the man who will not build up his brother's house. And his name shall be called in Israel, the house of him who had his sandal removed.'" Well, we wouldn't know what that was, but they did. It meant he didn't honor his commitments that were given to him by God. So that's the law of levirate marriage. And we see its purpose within that writing is to preserve families. And so let's go to chapter 3 now with that as a background. Chapter 3 of Ruth. "Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, 'My daughter, shall I not seek security for you that it may be well with you? Now Boaz, whose young women you were with, is he not our relative? In fact, he's winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Therefore, wash yourself and anoint yourself, put on your best garment, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he's finished eating and drinking. Then it shall be, when he lies down, that you shall notice the place where he lies, and you shall go in, uncover his feet, and lie down, and he will tell you what you should do.'" Okay, an astute woman, but we would call her a matchmaker, because that's what she's trying to do. She's trying to set up her daughter-in-law to get her married. One thing to notice that we may not fully understand, it says, "Wash yourself and anoint yourself." She would have put on some sort of oils, and these are not like baby oil. This instead is oil like like the oil that would come out of distilling some plants, like frankincense or myrrh. Both those are plants that they got oils out of. You can get oil out of lavender, and really you can get out of a lot of things. You get oil out of an orange, for instance, and you'd be amazed how nice it smells for somebody to put a little orange on themselves, or a little lavender or something. So what she's saying is, you get yourself all prettied up and smell good. That's what she's saying to her daughter-in-law. Now, the laying at his feet, there's nothing untoward there, no sin involved. She's going to lay there to be noticed, and she knows basically what's going to happen, and that's what comes next in the text. And she said to her, "All that you say to me, I will do." So she went down to the threshing floor and did according to all that her mother-in-law instructed her. And after Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was cheerful, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. And she came softly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. Now, there's no reason to believe that he got drunk and went to sleep. He worked all day. He ate and drank. And what do you do on a full belly after a hard day of work? I'll tell you what I do. If I lay down on the couch to watch TV, I watch the TV from the back on the back of my eyes, eyelids. Do you do that? Okay, that's what happened to him. He went to sleep after a hard day of work, and his belly being full. And now it happened at midnight that the man was startled and turned himself, and there a woman was lying at his feet. You'd be startled too, wouldn't you, if something was in your bed that you didn't expect to be there? Even he's laying down on the grain floor, but still. And he said, "Who are you?" So she answered, "I'm Ruth, your maidservant. Take your maidservant under your wing, for you are a close relative." Now remember, under your wing means I want to be under your protection. That is a euphemism, as is marry me. That's what she's offering. So then he said, "Blessed are you of the Lord, my daughter, for you have shown more kindness at the end than at the beginning, in that you did not go after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you request, for all the people of my town know that you are a virtuous woman. Now, it is true that I'm a close relative. However, there's a relative closer than I. Stay this night, and in the morning it shall be that if he will perform the duty of a close relative for you, well, good, let him do it. But if he does not want to perform the duty for you, then I will perform the duty for you as the Lord lives. Lie down until morning." So she lay at his feet until morning, and she arose before one could recognize another. Then he said, "Do not let it be known that the woman came to the threshing floor." Also he said, "Bring the shawl that is on you and hold it." And when she held it, he measured 6 ephahs of barley and laid it on her. Then she went into the city. Now, I do not know that he considered that to be like a dowry. I'm not sure, but it may be that's what he's thinking. He's going to give a dowry to the one responsible for her. That'd ultimately be Naomi. When she came to her mother-in-law, she said, "Is that you, my daughter?" Then she told her all that the man had done for her. And she said, "These 6 ephahs of barley he gave me, for he said to me, 'Do not go empty-handed to your mother-in-law.'" Then she said, "Sit still, my daughter, until you know how the matter will turn out, for the man will not rest until he has concluded the matter this day." A good matchmaker can see a marriage coming. I've observed that in the past, and here it goes. This is exactly how it's working out. Now Boaz went up to the gate and sat down there, and behold, the close relative of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, "Come aside, friend, sit down here." So he came aside and sat down. He took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, "Sit down here." So they sat down. What are they getting ready to do? Well, this is like court. Not in a negative way, but he's setting it up so that everything is done in a legal manner. And so they have witnesses, and everything's carried out according to God's law. Then he said to the close relative, Naomi, who's come back from the country of Moab, sold the piece of land which belonged to our brother Elimelech. And I thought to inform you, saying, buy it back in the presence of the inhabitants and the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not redeem it, then tell me that I may know, for there's no one but you to redeem it, and I am next after you. And he said, I will redeem it. Well, yeah, I'm going to get this extra land, is what I get out of that. That's pretty easy. But now watch what happens now. Then Boaz said, on the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you must also buy it from Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of the dead, to perpetuate the name of the dead through his inheritance. Okay, so you got to give some credit to Boaz. He knows how to couch everything. He set this thing up perfectly. All the elders have seen the fellow would like the land, but what does he think about having a child to the name of Ruth's husband? We're getting ready to find out. And the close relative said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I ruin my own inheritance. You redeem my right of redemption for yourself. I cannot redeem it. Now, this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging to confirm anything. One man took off his sandal and gave it to the other, and this was confirmation in Israel. Does that sound familiar? Sounds a lot like that law we read in Deuteronomy. So, therefore, let's see, I want to pick up there, verse 8 of chapter 4 of Ruth. Therefore, the close relative said to Boaz, buy it for yourself. So he took off his sandal. And Boaz said to the elders and all the people, you are witnesses this day that I bought all that was Elimelech's and all that was Chilion's and Mahlon's from the hand of Naomi. Moreover, Ruth, the Moabitess, the widow of Mahlon, I have acquired as my wife to perpetuate the name of the dead through his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brethren and from his position at the gate. You are witnesses this day. And all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, we are witnesses. The Lord make the woman who is coming to your house like Rachel and Leah, the two who built the house of Israel. And may you prosper in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem. May your house be like the house of Pires, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring which the Lord will give you from this young woman. Okay, they bring up Tamar. They know that this is in his lineage, that we're tracing back here. Boaz is a descendant of Tamar, therefore a descendant of Judah. So he's in the tribe of Judah, and that's what we now see. So pick up again, verse 13. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And when he went into her, the Lord gave her conception. She bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi, blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a close relative, and may his name be famous in Israel. And may he be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is better to you than 7 sons, has borne him. Then Naomi took the child and laid him on her bosom and became a nurse to him. Also the neighbor women gave him a name, saying, there is a son born to Naomi. They called his name Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now this is the genealogy of Pires. Pires begot Hezron. Hezron begot Ram. Ram begot Amminadab. Amminadab begot Nahshon. Nahshon begot Salmon. Salmon begot Boaz, and Boaz begot Obed. Obed begot Jesse, and Jesse begot David. Now, all of a sudden, we got a woman in the lineage of Christ. And it's a Moabitist, but she is in David's lineage. And you count, are there 10 generations between Ruth and David? There are not. Read the text. There are not 10 generations. So David should not have been able to enter the presence of the Lord, but he did. Why was he able to do it? Because she didn't remain a Moabitess. She is a Moabitess, but she's a proselyte. And her becoming a proselyte, seems to me, opens the door for David to be able to go into the presence of the Lord. And that's very, very, very important. Now, it's going to sound like I'm going off on a wild hair, but just hold with me a second. I want everybody to remember this, because starting next week, we're going to begin a year-long plus 1 week study of the life of Christ. And this sets the stage for that study. When we get into that study and we look at the genealogy of Jesus, we will immediately discover in Matthew chapter 1, 5 women in the lineage of Jesus. And when you look at those women, 2 of them are listed in this book. Tamar, mentioned by the women, and of course, Ruth is also in it. You've got, if you go back a little bit further, you've got Rahab the harlot, and then you've got Bathsheba, who bore Solomon, and finally you've got Mary. So 5 women, and I'm not sure we understand how rare it is for a woman to even be mentioned in the lineage of any man. And yet here are these 5 women all mentioned in the lineage of Jesus. So next week, Lord willing, what I'm going to do is give you some introductory material to the life of Christ. You might think in a year you're surely going to have plenty of time to do the life of Christ. I propose to you we do not. And that's why I want to do the introductory material next week and talk about some of those matters in our next gathering together. I'm reminded of a guy named J. Noel Meredith, who's a good gospel preacher, preached up in Memphis for about 17 years. He went to talk to those brethren about taking their job as pulpit preacher. And he said, well, I'm interested in your job, but I want to know, will you let me finish teaching the book of Matthew before you let me go? And they said, we will. And he stayed there 17 years, and to my knowledge had not finished Matthew when he died. So there's a lot of material really in the life of Christ, and we're not going to drag it out quite that long. Brother Meredith must have been way more knowledgeable than I am, but anyway, we're going to deal with the life of Christ. There'll be 3 of us that'll teach this class. I'm going to teach next week, and the following week, Derek's going to teach the week after that, and Ron Clemens is going to teach the week after that, I believe, if I remember correctly. And then we've got it scheduled out. It'll kind of even out all the way through as we study this together. Okay? Okay. Yeah. Mr. Bob pointing out that in Israel it was considered to be a high blessing to have 7 sons. And the women, in reference to Ruth, said, she's better to you than 7 sons. So that's, as he said, pretty high praise. Okay. Thank you very much. We'll gather together for worship in just a few minutes.